last plenary session, we continue the conversation, and we look now at future of evangelical theological education, pastoral and professional formation in Europe. This is the section. Okay. You hear me? Or? But David is hearing me, right? You hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Good, very good. Thank you. And we have one presenter. So Peter Panner will present, and then we'll have a response from Parushev. I think many of you, if not all of you, know Dr. Peter Panner. He's been a theological educator for many, many years, has done some pioneering work, significant pioneering work in establishing schools and universities in Russia, and then has taught theology in various schools, has written quite a number of books, has reflected on both on the theological but also on the practitioner side of theological education, has been involved in theological education for many, many years in Prague and IPTS, and now is with both with EAA and with EAAA. So we've been very grateful to have also myself have been for a friend for many years, learned many things from him. So we are very privileged to have him presenting to us today a paper on future of evangelical theological education, pastoral and professional formation in Europe. Peter, you're welcome.
I'm not going to have a PowerPoint, so no power. To the point. But I will try to speak to this interesting topic, future of evangelical theological education. And actually this is a topic that probably we need to talk together rather than one person. So I hope with what I will share will help to have this debate. And I have been learning that future, as I was told, can be sometimes perceived, understood if we look at the past. And so the past is teaching us about the future. At the same time, there's a lot of unknown things as we look at the future, and so as we look back, we see God's leading in what has been happening in the past. Knowing that He is going to lead us then also in the future, the same one who has been leading us through the past. And I think what we were talking also at this consultation, at this meeting, was also having a prophetic perspective that can help to look at the future. So I will try to risk that, but really actually to go to the past. And I want to start because I think we have had a lot of heavy conversations. Let me start with something narrative at the introduction and step into this history 25 years ago in Eastern Europe. And that leads me almost exactly 25 years ago to February 1993. This is where I want to start and use this narrative maybe to give some impulses to the present and to think about the future, because hopefully we can talk about some things in 25 years and look back, as I am now looking back to 25 years ago activity that happened then. February 1993. It was my first year as the rector of St. Petersburg Christian University, and I was 31 years old. So a few years have passed since. It was a turbulent academic first year where I was not just the dean, but the rector. St. Petersburg Christian University just moved from a province, from a Krasnodar region, in Russia, where we were starting and worked for 2 years at the setting of a communal farm at the village called Radniki. So it was a sovkhoz for those people who may still know those kind of nice terminology. You remember, some of you may remember that, those good days. So we moved from really a very village-focused place, and I remember going through the minefield, being a city boy, where you had water, no real road to walk, and the gooses left some mines all over, and I had to walk between those mines to find my way to the institution. From there we moved to the northern capital of Russia, to St. Petersburg. And February 1993 was an interesting event in many ways. Just before that, a few months before that February meeting, we had a gathering of bringing all different denomination leadership together and celebrating that we want to have a multi-denominational institution, not just one denominational school. And we had 2 institutional leaders, heads of 2 institutions that were similarly old as our institutions, so 2 years. And you may know some of those veterans of those days. Alexei Melnichuk, leading then Donetsk Christian University, and Sergei Sannikov, Odessa Theological Seminary. They were there just a couple of months before that February event, and we celebrated unity. We celebrated how can we work together in spite of competition, where we felt we are the only and the best school in all of the former Soviet Union. February 1993, what was there? There was a visit of a group first to St. Petersburg, visiting us. There was a group coming, part of the representatives of an organization some of you know, Overseas Council, US. That was my first time meeting those guys. There were 2 groups of 2 well-known seminaries, also to this place known seminaries, one presidents and vice presidents from the US institution called Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and the other one from Asbury Theological Seminary. And it was interesting to watch them debating between each other who are more important. We had Peter Deininger from the Mission to the East representative there. And for the first time I met our dear colleague Peter Kuzmich. That was February 1993 when I met him there. 20 years ago, for the first time that I visited actually this place, and we were sitting here for a conference. 25 years ago, quite a time. And for me it was important for different reasons. Let me give you a few of the things why I thought it is also important to bring it up today. In May 1993, 25 years ago, my institution for the first time had 15 BTH graduates. 3 years residential bachelor's program. Few remembering points from that time. The North American colleagues asked me, why do we want to continue and develop theological education and institution? Can't we just have one seminary in Osijek for all of Eastern Europe? Why do you want to have something in St. Petersburg? And I said I was young and inexperienced, my first year as a rector. So I asked, do you think one seminary for all of Eastern Europe is enough? And then the second question I asked, how many seminaries do you have in the US? I think they have been wrong with suggesting one seminary for all of Eastern Europe. But in the mid-90s, we had suddenly over 100 of them. And I think that was there were just too many. And we, I think, still struggling with this in all of Eastern Europe, and I think we are struggling with this issue here at the Balkan consultation. The problem is it possible to reduce? Is it? I've been talking at the meeting of the CIS gatherings where institutions were struggling to survive, but they rather die than merge. And I think this is part of the tragedy, I think, we are there. And I'm talking especially about, CIS. I'm sure it's much better here. But there, it is still a challenge. How do you merge? The same February meeting, we moved from the northern capital to the main capital of those days, not only Russia. In some ways, we still felt this is the center of the Commonwealth of independent state, to Moscow. And so we had a gathering of all or most institutions in the CIS meeting in Moscow for this first gathering. I think the next largest gathering was really in Oradea, 1994. So just a bit more than a year after this meeting. Let me comment on this. And as similar as all conference and consultations, the most important things happen not when people speak from the front, but the most important things happen between those sessions and speeches with a cup of coffee or tea, and this is true then. One of the important side topic that we had there was we started to talk about the Eurasian Accrediting Association there in February 1993, and thanks to my wife, she translated the documents of EEEE of those days into Russian. We had the first base of this material. That was 25 years ago. And some of the materials grew out of this, and we have EAAA today with some interesting challenges, and as Anne-Marie was pointing to, that group 56 member institutions it has presently, and at that time we were kind of struggling. Should we be part of EEAA then? I think at that time those institutions were not ready. The lingua franca was then Russian, even for the Ukrainians. Now, and I'm not blaming the Ukrainians, I think this is their right to speak Ukrainian. And so probably the common language needs to become again English for all of us, not Russian. Even so, Russians may like that, and it would be easier for me too. So as we meet here, and it is interesting that we have a couple people here from EEAA, or should I better say the European Council of Theological Education, here at the OSIAC Balkan consultation. Maybe this is an interesting place to think of some closer connection of these two, and let me just speak out something that hopefully we can pick up later. What if the next General Assembly of ECTE will be in Osijek, to bring the Balkan institutions this way together and introduce ECTE this way? At that meeting, in Moscow, as I said, 3 leading institutions. Sometimes they were called the Ukrainian St. Petersburg Mafia among our guys in the CIS, the Donetsk Christian University, Odessa Theological Seminary, and the St. Petersburg Institution. We have also decided to do something else. We decided, before I met my colleagues, I knew St. Petersburg Christian University is the best. Until I realized it isn't. And I need to learn in a number of areas, something from Odessa and something from Donetsk. We had some nice meetings. I learned to eat pig fat, the Ukrainian salo, with those 2 brothers together. And out of this sala and tea joys, developed something we call the Eurasian Masters Program. That was before EEPGST or EAST, that some of you may know. And it started between those 3 institutions and all of those 3 campuses each summer. So that by 1997 we had the first graduation and the only graduation of the joint program, because we realized we need to work together as much as we felt competition and a lot of other things. Again, I'm just telling the story that we needed that. I don't know if you need some cooperation together. So I'm just telling the story. The history tells us, looking back 25 years, many things about the present. And it is good to compare, it is good to look at, and also to see what happens. Let me look at those 3 institutions, especially one of them ended up in the war zone, Donetsk Christian University. It's out of existence, and we still dream that more than 40,000+ volumes, probably still the largest evangelical theological library of Ukraine, can't be taken out and be used because I don't know who is there. Spetsnaz, the Ukrainian, the Russian Ukrainian separatists at the Donetsk campus. But it's a nice place for military, seminary campus.
Are they studying theology now?
Unfortunately not. And I learned from Alexei Minichuk, who is still connected to the place, that from time to time people have been sitting there almost like in the basement, changed to a prison. What is going on inside of that campus? So it's not necessarily theology. Maybe public theology, I don't know.
No.
But very separate in a way, because they have walls surrounding, so you cannot get simply in. But this tells you that it isn't all how we were dreaming it 25 years ago, what we have today. And not all what we are dreaming now here will happen today. On the other hand, something wonderful has happened. EAAA developed a few years later then. And out of that, a journal, Theological Reflection, developed, Slavic Bible Commentary developed. We have started doctoral consultation and doctoral supervision, and even we had a training on good Russian-Ukrainian soil in Antalya this January, training mentors and supervisors for doctoral students in Antalya, Turkey, because that was the best common ground between Russia and Ukraine. So Turkey, from that perspective, is very neutral and very positive and not a difficult place to go. Master's programs since then have developed almost like mushrooms in this whole region. I'm not sure if I may call all of them master's programs, but they all needed the next step of training. And how do you train? And later then we realized we need a place again, like in 1993, to train doctoral supervisors together. It is important to work together, to build things, to develop things together. So as I hope that this consultation, and I'm speaking from outside, not knowing all the dynamics, this is nature coming to the church from outside and can speak about hot topics, and no one will think, oh, he knows and talks now about my hurt. I hope I have that opportunity and role a little bit. Because what is happening in that eastern part is obviously different to what you have here. We had, at least until recently, the lingua franca of Russian language. This is fading away. And we'll see what will happen in 10 years, not talking about 25 years, about that language. You are in a very different setting. You have already the different languages. And the lingua franca might be the English language. A lot has changed also since then. We believed those 25 years ago that the only way of doing proper theological education is full-time. Today, there are maybe a handful of institutions in all of the former Soviet Union that have full-time training. And usually, I think all of them are at most on a bachelor's level. I don't know of anyone, I think, on a master's who does, or something like that, who does that in a way other than alternative, as we were using the terminology, education. And so the things have changed in many ways also there. And another thing has changed to the positive, going through crisis. As we talk about crisis, I was taught by my doctoral supervisor, Dr. Vater David Bosch, crisis is an opportunity. The crisis in the late 90s in the Commonwealth of Independent States became that suddenly the West was not interested financially anymore in that region. There's still some money there, but most is gone. And suddenly the leaders of institutions had to think differently. Before, we actually didn't need the churches. We were sitting on good Western money and support. We were the big king, had each our own little kingdom, and looked down at the churches. And now we have to go back. You know, the best Greek word, if you use it etymologically, is diakonia. This is what the leaders of schools had to go through, crawl through the dust, back to the church, and church leaders to say, we need you. Before, who are you to tell us? I'm sure again you have no problems with that. But the people in the CIS had suddenly to learn to listen to the churches. And so change the mode of delivery. I know in the Western Europe we still have a lot of residential classes. When I speak of my Německa, the German setting, where I come from, where the government is paying the students, you can have stipends. You can have full-time residential studies. But if no one is paying, and the student has to pay the tuition, you cannot run full-time residential studies, more or less you can't. And you have to do very creative ways of teaching. You have to start satellite campuses. You have to teach in the churches. You have to go and listen to the pastors and say, what do you need? And how can we serve you? And this, I think, has been happening, is going to happen. Those institutions that are still not listening, they will soon disappear. This is what has been experienced in Eastern Europe. So a very different development. This is a bit of the history, the narrative. And because the Bible is out of more than 40% of narratives. For us to learn, I thought maybe narrative could help us to learn a little bit on this direction of where can we go as Balkan institutions. Again, you cannot copy what the CIS said, with the different languages, with the different borders. Even so, EU may help us to get rid of some borders, maybe in I don't know how many years. But there are other borders still there, and there are languages still there, and still there is a way to overcome them in order to work and to build networks. Let me talk a little bit about models on theological education in the Balkans. And you know, there are some wonderful books written about those models, so probably I'm not the best to just present some, and Bernard has done, I think, a marvelous job presenting us quite a bit of the models as well as the current challenges that we face in Europe in theological education. Still, I think I want to connect a bit to some models that I think I can identify in the Balkan context. And you know, we talk about some models that are sometimes connected to certain cities. There's this nice book by David Kelsey, Between Athens and Berlin, that is helping us to look at the theological educational debate, comparing those not just cities, but what they stand for when it comes to education, and then what it stands for theological education. Or Robert Banks' book on re-envisioning theological education, where he is favoring, I think, the Jerusalem model. But let me point to one of the authors we already heard, Bernard Otz, and his book that probably helps you. If you read that book, I think you get quite a good picture. Understanding and Developing Theological Education is a book that gives you really a good overview. So this will give you enough to look at those nice models that we still kind of operate, and still need to look beyond those models, the Athens, Jerusalem, Geneva, Berlin. I don't know, most of you are familiar with those models. Maybe few are not, so for the few, let me just summarize. But then please read this book from Bernard, and then maybe the others that I mentioned as well. Athens usually is presented as the academy, the classical educational model. And its goal is really to transform individuals. And so the focus is on the classical, that personally I grew up in, focusing on theologia, what they want to stand for. Then the one that I really like is the Jerusalem model, because it focuses on community and contextualization, and so it wants to be missional. And I think we have been talking at this consultation quite a lot about church and mission, and I think theological education needs to be much stronger, focused on the mission of God in order to respond. And so this model offers a bit, because it focuses on how do we evangelize the world, because that's what was happening from Jerusalem on. And so theology is then in their understanding mission. And then Geneva, obviously, is a very important project, model that I think is still for many, well, longing for it as we talk about the need of pastors. How can we train them? Because the Geneva model is the seminary model. And its characterization, it works on the confessional training, so that our pastors are able to train, our students can become trainers and pastors in our denomination for our church. And then obviously Berlin stands for the university setting. Last year I had to speak in Krasnodar about that topic, and you know, in Russia and even in Kazakhstan I've seen somewhere at the public space. And if you look at those 4 models, I think all of them are needed. My call would be to all who are here, as we are starting to talk together, we need to start mapping what do we have in the Balkans on theological training, what are the focuses. Even so, in each of the local places, you need a general training program, but then to see what is there. Some of you have been a year ago at the Malinovice gathering, where a project had been presented, and it was an interesting one. But I think we need more than that. We really need a research of this setting in the Balkans, of the mapping out what is going on at the different institutions, what is happening there, what are the focuses, what is offered there. I'm sure this can be easily even a PhD dissertation, but at least somehow we need to initiate that. I think this will help us to be informed as we talk about what do we need, because I'm afraid we will realize we are missing quite a bit of area in theological education, and we have maybe a lot of duplicating on the other side. How can we use the wise way of that? As we look at the models, I think it is also helpful to look at more than that. There is this interesting classroom that I started to develop. My kids look at me as a dinosaur when it comes to the virtual world. And still, when sometimes I start learning from there, as I have questions and I turn a YouTube video and they explain to me in a very simple way how to do this or that. How can we develop more of this Google, I don't know if that is then another location, model. And I think here is something big missing. And people like me who use them, like I'm after this classroom, I'm used to use Moodle, for instance, for a while, for quite a bit. Now, for the first time, I started to experiment the Google Classroom virtual thing for my students that I will meet Friday and Saturday in my church. So the young people are happy to use this kind of thing. But I am a dinosaur with my background on virtual reality. So we need the natives of that setting to help us to learn, but actually probably we need to empower and encourage them to do this, and we can mentor with our solid theological base. Some of the things that we can do. How can we do all of this that is there? I mean, if you listen to what you have listened well to what Werner said, and all the challenges and all the other things, you might just say, how in the world is our institution going to do all of this? Your institution will never do that, even if it is as big as the Baptist Academy in Budapest. No institution can do it all. This is why we need togetherness. We need to work together. We need to find out what competencies do we have at our local institution. What are we best at? And what are the needs, so that the best we can offer, And the rest, we learn, I think, from the business world today, and the big factory and organization. They outsource then those competencies that they don't are not able to do, and let the others do for them. Is that a way maybe that some programs can be done by someone else? Maybe even at your institution. Or let me talk about the churches. Maybe as you think of how can we train our people for our church and the best in the church, how can we maybe use those competent people from the one or the other church for the third? I've seen in St. Petersburg an interesting model that the churches decided to bring their church people together and ask 2 seminaries, because they said that seminary can do this better and the other one can do the other part better, to deliver their program for them. Instead of bringing who knows what or on whatever level, they used, I think very creatively, something that is working. How can we use our competencies and then bring in others in to help us? So maybe you are not able to run a master's program, but others have the competencies. Or you may not be able to train in missiology, but some other people can do that, or in leadership, or in other areas. And it still can be your program on your campus, if you bring those people in. Those are just ideas, experiences that I have seen going on. But the reality, I think, is a little bit different when we look at theological education. I think even in Balkans, maybe, I don't know. I have seen further east in some places, you know, that like in bureaucracy, you know, we have survived the Habsburg bureaucracy, and we built on the bureaucracy of the Habsburg our communist bureaucracy. And when they were gone, we built up the post-communist bureaucracies. And it is just a pile of a lot of bureaucracy going on. And something similar is with theological education. Just to illustrate, I think part of the problem, it is so difficult, you know, to change your curriculum. You can add. But some, especially of our faculty members, will fight until blood for their specific courses and modules. So how can we get rid of some bureaucracy? And there is, I think, a lot of calling what Bologna has been pushing us to for equipping for purpose, the competency, the thinking of what is actually needed. And how can we work sufficiently, perfectly. Now, being trained in the good old system. I have been challenging those people because I'm always crying with one ear with one eye, as I look at the changes in theological education. You know, this new thing, and I compare it with the toothbrush. And the old thing that is like an icon. For me at least. You may see that differently. Yes, the toothbrush I need at least once a day, hopefully for more. And how useful is an icon? But you know, after a couple of weeks or months, I throw this toothbrush away for a new one. But I will keep this old wonderful icon forever. There is something beautiful about the old. And so I'm afraid that we may, you know, as some people say, fall from the other side of the horse. As we have this nice conversation of the new ways and of the system. And I'm quite amazed about the one for whom we actually work, God. When He created everything, I mean, He was wasteful. I mean, come on. As He has created, why didn't He strongly focus and be more efficient? And why all the waste? I mean, how many trees do we have? 5 would be enough. 5 different kinds. One for the beauty and the rest for the fruits or something. Or maybe all for the fruit. All the stupid animals and other creatures. I mean, theological education, should it not be as everything, just packaged? We talk about McDonaldization. I would like to say Ikeanization. Simple, put it together, every stupid guy can do it. Even I can put this furniture together. This is how theological education should be. I am afraid of that we are losing something. With respect to what we are challenged and called to do efficiency, to be data-driven and based, and many other things that are important. But to see how can we keep the balance. Not to lose the one, not gaining the other. I think that might be the danger, that we may not get the one, and we have thrown away the other. How can we work together? How can we keep things that we have? And how can we continue? And here we are back to the 25 years in the future. Where do we go? How can we go into the future? What kind of a model? What will we say in 25 years about this meeting? I hope it is one of the key meetings for the Balkan on theological education. We need to get an idea how to use this crisis as an opportunity for theological education, for training the church, mission, parachurch, and all the other ministries in the region, locally, also globally, in the kingdom of God and in the mission of God. So we need not only challenges and issues where we think of, it's getting worse. People are going, seminaries are getting emptier, our churches are getting emptier. No, I think there is something where we need to pick up opportunities. Let me give you another little story at the end, as we are need to close. There's a project that I got in called Campus Danuba, the private university for the church and society in Vienna, that we're trying to develop at the heart of the city of Vienna, right? Less than 5 minutes walking distance from the main train station. To train people for church and society. And the reason was the society. About 5 years ago, the small little churches received a recognition as churches in Austria. In the 70s, I was told, when free churches were meeting in their buildings, sometimes stones would fly through the windows. Today, in this context of Austria, the same Catholic environment may allow to develop a Christian university with all of the facets that are possible. I know in Germany you cannot start a Christian university. I don't know if it can be done in your context. There you can. That means you can build up to PhD in habilitation if this goes through. What can be done there? There is an opportunity. There is an opportunity that we need to see. The best vision for the opportunity has been given us by the sermon of Apostle Peter at Pentecost. And let me quote and try to finish with that. Acts 2, verses 16 and 17. There, Peter says, "But this is what was spoken of through the prophet Joel, some time ago, the prophet Joel had a vision. And it shall be in the last days, God says, that I will pour forth my spirit upon all mankind. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. That is what we need for the future, right? And your young men shall see vision. And your old men shall dream dreams. I'm probably in the last category. What dreams do you have? I know that can sound like you are mad. And this is some dreaming and some prophecy can sometimes sound like madness. At Pentecost they were dreaming quite a bit. But they have not been dreaming what we have today at the church worldwide. So our dreams may not be fulfilled 100%, but maybe 200%. Because God's dreams are even bigger. How can we tune in God's vision for Balkans? This is why we are here. And may God bless us, give us the gift of prophecy, dreams, and visions for the next 25 years and beyond.